Just as a short reminder, our Fest X Awards are right after this keynote session by three awesome leaders in the community, Leah Fisher, Stacy Smith, and Jennifer Justice. Please welcome them to the stage.
Hello, everybody. So as Kai said, thank you for sticking around, and we promise there'll be lots of drinks afterwards. So to get us started, we have to the right of me, Jennifer Justice, otherwise known as JJ, who's President of Corporate Development at Superfly. Her work is about driving, evaluating, and executing new business development initiatives, including partnerships and acquisitions. Prior to Superfly, Jennifer was the EVP of Strategic Marketing and Biz Dev for Rock Nation. And during her tenure there, she expanded their portfolio to include TV, film, branding, sports, and media entertainment through strategic partnerships. As an attorney, Jennifer had represented top talent, including working as Jay-Z's personal entertainment attorney for 17 years. Next to JJ, we have Dr. Stacy Smith, who's the founder and director of the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. For the past 12 years, she's been a researcher and advocate for inclusion in the entertainment industry. Her work focuses on uncovering exclusionary hiring practices in the executive ranks of media companies, as well as on-screen and behind the camera in film, TV, and digital storytelling. Now applying her expertise to examine the ways in which the music industry implicitly and explicitly excludes women and people of color on the business and artistic sides. She's written over 100 journal articles and book chapters, and her work is perpetually in the popular press. In 2015, Dr. Smith was ranked the most influential person in Los Angeles by LA Weekly. Woohoo. So please welcome JJ and Dr. Smith. So here today, just to let you know, we're going to chat for about 20 minutes and then open it up to Q&A. So I hope you guys will have some great questions for our two panelists here. We're going to be talking about art and commerce and how these two powerful worlds intersect given these two folks on stage. So first up is for JJ. Well, we're going to start with a small question here. So take me through the intersection of art and commerce when it comes to live events. How do these two meet?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people have heard this kind of quote, like everyone can have a really great or creative idea, and that's all well and good, but if it doesn't make any money, then it's, you know, what's the point of it, right? And then on the other side, you can have, you know, something where you're like, oh, this is just gonna make us a lot of money, but if it's not creative or doesn't kind of stand for anything or is not inspiring, then what would make people, you know, continuing to come back? So it's that balance between the two, which is what we try to do at Superfly. We're a very creative-led company, so we're always trying to find that delicate balance of not being this amazing creative idea, but you know, we're gonna lose our ass. You know what I mean? So it's where those two meet.
Which is really the business side of it, right? So from a business practitioner side, what you're looking for. What do you think consumers are looking for? Do they even know?
I mean, I think the consumers, you know, especially in this completely tech-led time, you know, they're looking for inspiration and something that, you know, they can build with another community and people like that are like-minded. So, you know, they want to get out in real life and have experiences that matter and are meaningful.
And for example, maybe you could share a little bit about Colossal Comedy Fest as one example of how that comes to life.
Colossal Cluster Fest?
That's what I mean.
No one did that right. Yeah, I mean, you know, so what we were trying to do with Colossal Cluster Fest, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, it's a partnership we have with Comedy Central, and it's basically a comedy festival, but it's a little unlike other ones where we are bringing a lot of the different disciplines in comedy. So we had stand-up, it's called Comedy, Music Comedy. So we had stand-up, and then we had music, and we had activations like recreating you know, Seinfeld. So we had Jerry Seinfeld, we had Bill Burr, and we had Kevin Hart. And then we had, you know, Ice Cube perform before Kevin Hart, because they're in movies a lot together. We recreated the Seinfeld apartment. You could walk through the Kramer door and Instagrammable moment. You know, you could sit on the Jerry's couch. We had the soup Nazi there serving soup, and we had Monk's Cafe with, you know, the big salad and black and white cookie, and then, you know, we had a podcast room, and so we had Two Dope Queens, and we had Broad City read a live reading of Wayne's World with Tig Notaro and, you know, some of the other cast. So it was like building these things for the consumer where it's like you can love comedy, you can love, and there's something for everybody there, right? And so everybody won. So the comedians, you know, the fans really loved it, which was great, and that's what we want, but the comedians really loved it too. They never get to do these other kinds of things, and they never get to do it all together. And they were in one place in the Bill Graham Civic and the plaza in front. So you had this kind of building of the community of comedy and really moving it kind of to the next level.
Curious too, especially as we're talking about inclusion. You know, you mentioned Kevin Hart and Ice Cube. Were there women headlining as well? Were women part of the comedy fest?
Yeah, we had, there was a ton of women. There was, you know, Broad City, Two Dope Queens. We had Sarah Silverman. She then kind of curated her whole lineup. I think 2 or 3 of them were women. We had Tig Notaro. There's, you know, a lot of women, and stay tuned for the next lineup. There'll be more.
How has the business really changed over the last 5 years?
I mean, there's a lot of saturation in this area, right? There's you know, new festivals popping up every day, but what is really changed is the marketplace for it. You know, there's not this a la carte thing anymore. It's got to be more specific to a specific set of rules and values and people, but the market itself, like all the, you know, we do a lot of work with brands, like I just said with Comedy Central. What has happened is that their marketing budgets that used to be for advertising, or the advertising budgets, have been cannibalized a lot by Facebook and Google, and you see a lot of those budgets shifting more toward experiential and people really wanting those real life experiences, which gives the brands a real amazing opportunity to connect with and see who their real consumers and fans are and bring them something valuable.
Which is so interesting, because for a while we saw money moving away from a lot of the live experiential events. So as more businesses are considering, you know, how to actually activate around this experiential, you know, event, what are some things that they should be considering or thinking through?
I mean, before we start anything, it needs a narrative and it needs a point of view. Like, why are we doing this? Like, there's a million different festivals. Why would they come to ours versus somebody else's, right? And it's got to have that real connection. So we spent a lot of time thinking about it. You know, once we set the venue, like for instance, Lost Lake, we had the venue. It's this beautiful park in Phoenix called Indian Steel, and no one ever went there. It was like in the middle of downtown. You know, the mayor's office really wanted it to happen. The city really wanted it to happen. Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States, and there's nothing that built the community together. There was a celebration of Phoenix. And so we looked into this park, and there's a lake in the middle of it. And we're like, we dug deep in the history and tradition of it, and found out it was called Lost Lake. And so that ended up being the name of the festival. Then we started doing more, you know, research and stuff, and found out it was like there's a lot of Native American history there. So we got a lot of the Native American tribes to perform there. They were doing a lot of stuff on the stages. We looked into, you know, what are famous names around there, like Piastua, which is this Native American woman who died in the Iraqi war. They named a mountain range up Piastua Mountains, and we named a stage after her. And then like cultivating like what's the most amazing food, which is there's so much great food there, and like what do people like to do? It's a big sports town, so we made these games and activated in the games thing. So we just were constantly thinking how we can kind of over deliver to really celebrate the town of Phoenix. And when people came, they were like beside themselves. They couldn't believe how much attention to detail we had put into the stage scrims with the local, Phoenix artists, and they're very like tribal drawings and stuff. So it was like building in that community and making them proud that that's theirs and theirs only. And all the press, that's what they talk about. It's like, oh, we finally got something, like we like made it. I'm like, you're the 5th largest city in the U.S. and you just made, yeah.
It's such an awesome example of how we should be understanding our communities and where we live. Right now, we seem to be at a cultural tipping point when it comes to issues of sexual harassment, workplace safety, particularly in media and entertainment. Do you think that what we've seen in the last 2 months is setting the stage for a larger sea change and transformation? And are you also experiencing points of resistance?
I mean, look, it's it's a tough topic in general. Like, every day we hear about somebody else. I hope it changes it, but I hope it changes it for the right reasons. Like, this is not some like witch hunt. This is about an imbalance of power and people using and abusing their power to keep other people from having it. And it's really just about equality. It's about everybody having an equal opportunity in the workplace.
Thank you. So a second aspect of inclusion is that audiences have changed just in terms of demographics in the US. Our communities are more diverse, and that means inclusion is more important than ever, but it seems to be thwarted by some very common misconceptions or myths. One of those is that women don't help each other, which we're seeing break down on a daily basis as women come forward with stories of harassment and other women stand with them. As we start to bring the idea of inclusion into the conversation, JJ, could you share how you and Stacy met and how our work together is evolving from that meeting?
Well, I'm part of another women's organization that I'm the chairman of called We, and on my board is a woman, Sam Kirby, who's an agent at WME. She had been speaking to Stacy and knew all of her work, and said, would you meet with her? So she came to the office in New York. You were there as well. And literally we could not stop talking about, this issue.
True.
Because I don't believe that women, I do believe women help each other. In the music industry, a lot of the women who've been there for a long time have helped me tremendously. And sometimes there is a bit of maybe a jealousy or whatever, but it's only because you can only see what you can be, right? There's only one office for the women, so they think that all they're competing for is that one office. And that's like what lights the fire, and you get this horrible, reputation that you're fighting because you don't like each other, which is not at all the case. A lot of my mentors are icons in this business, from Marsha Vlasic to Michelle Anthony. I've grown up in this business with them, and they've done anything I've ever needed, they've helped me.
Well, we definitely come from that same school of thought. So Stacy, as we're tackling something extraordinary, as we try to create a more inclusive environment in our industry, why does inclusion matter?
That's a great question. I often think that the question perhaps should be, why doesn't it matter? 40% of the United States are underrepresented racial or ethnic groups. Kids 0 to 5 in this country are the majority underrepresented. Women represent 50% of the population. People with disabilities represent 20% of the population. So if you're interested in commerce and business, and you're not diverse in terms of thinking about just not numbers, but inclusion, how do you create an experience based on a community, whether it's Native Americans, women in comedy, which Hollywood movie making doesn't seem to understand at all. It's really synonymous with a good business sense, right? There's a moral imperative, of course. Humans are humans, and you have to treat everyone with respect and dignity. But if you want to make money domestically or internationally in any entertainment capacity, to not be inclusive is to shoot yourself in the foot and to not think about return on investment. It simply doesn't make sense to not have it be part of a strategic business plan.
So given that it's at the very center of how people should be thinking about their own businesses and growing it from a bottom line standpoint, what are certain strategies folks in this room can adopt, and what are different steps they can take?
Well, I think that when you think about inclusion as a company, you should be thinking about what are your target inclusion goals? What are you trying to accomplish, whatever your business imperative is? So let's say you're in the movie business, right? I know this is about live events, and Hollywood has a crisis on their hands with motion pictures, right? People are going to the big tent poles, but outside of these big experience movies like Star Wars that's about to come out, film is struggling. And so you really have to think through strategically, what is it that you want to achieve? And you have to be risky, which is what you just articulated. You're taking risks with building these comedy platforms. In Hollywood, comedy is for an exclusive group of people. Individuals that can open a film are typically white, straight, male, able-bodied males, which is interesting because JJ mentioned Kevin Hart, who, if you're tweeting, happens to be the most successful male actor in Hollywood over the last 4 years. Kevin Hart, right? It's not Tom Cruise, it's not Matt Damon, it's not Ben Affleck. And so thinking strategically, what are your goals? And how do you ensure that all communities that you're trying to service and sell to reflect that imperative, that why? Now, just as an adventure in missing the point, I'm going to show you how most media companies in the film arena actually don't do this. I think I have 2 slides. If you can just put up the first slide, I want to illustrate just how easy it is to miss who your target audience might be. And I don't know if Kai is here to cue the first slide, but if you look over the last almost a decade, 900 films, 39,788 speaking characters, only a third of all speaking characters in the most popular motion pictures in the United States, less than a third, feature girls and women. And yet, 50% of the population, right? The wealth in 20 years will be controlled, inherited by, or earned by women in this country. Internationally, making a mark.
Purchasing power too, right?
Absolutely. So this is an adventure in missing the point and not understanding that females are at the heart of so many purchasing decisions. Now, it gets worse when you think about Hollywood's inclusion crisis when you cross gender and race ethnicity. You can't just simply say females. You really have to think about who are the communities that you're trying to lure to the box office. And if we take a look at the next slide, if you look at just the last 100 films in Hollywood, it's really revealing who Hollywood's not thinking about. There's really an epidemic of invisibility. Across the top 100 films of 2016, if they bring in the next graphic, you'll see 47 didn't feature one black female on screen speaking. 47 out of 100. 66, not one Asian female on screen. 72 out of 100, not one Latina. And in terms of the LGBT community, 91 out of 100 movies didn't feature a single female from any of those groups. So if you're thinking strategically about business practices and inclusion, you have to think broadly and widely to make sure whoever your target audience and reach consists of, that they're represented, much like JJ was just talking about, whether it's comedy or Lost Lake. Because Native Americans are simply not seen in television or film, or really in streaming content as well. So that event in Phoenix is an aberration from what we would expect to see in this content.
Now, at the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, which you started a little over 10 years ago, the main focus, pretty much up till date, has been TV, film, and digital storytelling. And the exciting announcement, if any of you saw about a month ago, and which we're so pleased that JJ is one of our esteemed members of our advisory board, is that we announced an expanded focus into music. And so this is the first time, because we're going to be looking holistically across issues of inclusion as it pertains to entertainment. But looking at the music industry, you've had this idea of approaching it a little bit differently. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, in the past we've done reports and put out the research and see if anybody might be interested in seeking our counsel, because television's doing better, but film is doing abysmal. Digital, it depends on the storytelling vehicle. So we do these reports, we shame the industry and we wait to see if anybody would call. Now, with music, which is going to face some real challenges, particularly for women, I think they're going to do better with underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. On the producing side for females, it's going to be abysmal. And some of the work that we want to do is we want to find out why, where are the leaks and cracks in the pipeline, where are their exclusionary hiring practices. And all of this will directly relate to live events because, right, if you're populating live events and festivals with performers, right, who you have to draw from, it should be a wide pool. Instead of putting out the research and then letting companies respond, we're working hand in hand with businesses. And whether it's live or fictional or non-fictional storytelling, our job is to really have businesses come work with the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative and advise us, and we in turn advise them to help them set target inclusion goals for 2, 4, 6 years out, and give them strategies and tools to reach those goals.
So JJ gave us a little bit of what it looked like 5 years ago up to today. Can you share a little bit about looking 5 years out? where are we going to see inclusion going? Why is it so important? And why is it so important for the audience experience?
Well, given the target demographics that I just mentioned, everything is being disrupted. And so to think strategically from a financial perspective, if inclusion isn't one of your top priorities, you're simply going to be leaving money on the table. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this live experience will lead the charge, as well as streaming platforms, because it's the wild, wild west. They will take risks. They will seek new models. They will seek new ideas and opportunities for those audiences. The film industry isn't taking steps to change. So the question is, how much money will be lost before they're forced to do something different? Because these numbers haven't really moved, particularly with women. If we think about the percentage of female speaking characters on screen, it hasn't changed since the late 40s, early 50s. So we're talking 70 years of oppression. And if they simply were to ask folks working in other paradigms and platforms how to think about inclusion, their business model could flip, not just domestically, but internationally as well. And we have those financial models that challenge their assumptions.
Thank you. We want to turn to all of you. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Yes.
Hello. So my question is, so this year hip hop surpassed as the most popular genre, and I wanted to ask, what are specific practices that help address the conscious and unconscious bias that prevent women and people of color from being hired, particularly in music? Because if you go to the halls of any music agency, if you go to any live event promoter, although the acts are women and people of color, nobody in the executive ranks is. So what are real things that you can actually do to make sure that the acts on stage and the people backstage are very similar, inclusion-wise?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of different things. One, I'm going to answer very briefly. I'd love your card, and I'd love to follow up with you, because we're going to start dropping research in 2018 that addresses that specific issue. The way that this could be changed almost overnight, which is the same thing that we see in film, television, and digital, artists need to harness their power, change their contracts, and demand that the pipeline and the environment that surrounds them in their contracts reflects the world that they want to see. So anyone an artist touches, and this is a tall order because there are not many female producers, which suggests to me intuitively that female performers are not asking to work with female producers. And so artists have to be sensitized as much as agents and musicians and folks in the recording arena. We have to know what the pipeline is to set realistic aspirations to reach those goals, and we need to work with the educational platforms to ensure that there's a pipeline across the business and the artistic side. But we're going to be addressing all of those issues in a series of reports that we put out in 2018. So be on the lookout, because some of it is in fact unconscious bias, but most of it, let's be clear, is conscious and exclusionary, discriminatory hiring practices that exclude women and people of color.
Anybody else?
No one, nothing?
Quiet room.
No. Answered all their questions.
No? Oh.
Hi, Laura Hagel here with the Confluence and Bravo Media. I am curious about, it's interesting, just as I've been moving around the space and talking with people, how there's a reference to, like, the guy, or have a guy do it, or we need 6 guys to do this, or, you know, and just starting to, or continuing to shift that, you know, call that out when we hear it. When something that we hear doesn't sound right, or when it sounds like one-sided, presencing that and being courageous in that. So I know the more that I'm doing that in my life, and the more I see other people do it, the more we can shift the perspective. I also think about the power in gathering together. And so at events like this, I think it's awesome to do like women in live events, or women in this space to network and connect. So having a meetup here next year for women in the business will be really powerful, just to make sure that we're all connected and can keep forwarding the movement. And then aside from just, the gender piece is so big, but it's also gender and race, ethnicity, cultural background, folks with disabilities, and just making sure that we're bringing everyone into the mix, because we're leaving a lot of money or brain, brilliance, people, power, potential on the table by making assumptions. So just the more that we can keep shifting our perspectives and embracing each other and lifting each other up and asking questions and getting curious, the more that we'll be able to be just more powerful as a human race. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Hi, I am a live event producer, amongst other things, and I also work really closely with Peace Over Violence. And I'm curious if what you think of the Me Too movement having any impact on the live event space.
I don't know how it couldn't. I think that we start seeing this rolling evolution. This week it's restaurateurs. It keeps happening, and the fact that people are empowered, women are empowered, feel empowered and okay to say things is an amazing step. So what Stacy and Leah are doing in the music industry, we have to think about it from the female artists as well, who touring is not extremely female friendly. When they're on the road, it's they often, you hear stories. I was a music attorney before this, and I represent a lot of females. They didn't feel very safe a lot of times. When you're just starting out, some of them, like the background singer. I was just hearing, a young woman last week tell me how that as she was like a keyboardist and really up and coming. If I said the name of this female artist, everyone would know it. She was forced to sleep in hotel rooms with guys, and I was like, it's not even she doesn't even know because they're on a budget. So I think that a lot of things are going to start coming out, and people, as long as they feel safe and don't feel like they're going to be criticized for doing it, I think it's going to make a movement. And we should start with everybody here, and male and female, because it's going to take all of us together to change and shift that balance of power.
Anybody else? Oh, someone over here too.
Hello, speaking of inclusion, at booth 79 this evening we're going to do lighting the menorah for Hanukkah. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah. All right, well, thank you all. One more? Can we do one more question? Last one? Last quick one.
Hi. I can talk about it. That's okay. My name is Stephanie Rosa. I'm representing the Festival Squad, and I'm just curious, what advice would you have for women that are just starting off in this industry? I'm here with a group of women myself representing my team, and what kind of advice would you give to us in terms of networking with other women in order to get to where you ladies are today?
Where are you guys based?
We have hubs in Phoenix, San Francisco, and Chicago.
Look, there's so many more women's organizations now than there was before. There's a lot of meetup. There's the Wing that's opening all over the place. There's other ones in LA. The names are completely escaping me. We're part of a program called We have the Music Initiative. you know, my rule is anybody who reaches out to me, like, I will speak to at least for 15 minutes, you know, and I think you call on people and cold call them and get your network and your posse together, because everyone's going to be open to it. They just will, you know, and it's going to take initiative, and then once you get out there, you just find it's like rolling, you meet more and more and more people.
Yeah, I'd say create your list and go after it, because right now there's because of not just Me Too, but incidents leading up to the last election, I think women's voices and their passion to mentor, to lead, to promote, to retain, it's changed. Even in the academic context, you know, talking to young women about negotiating and pay equity. Now is the time. Find those leaders that you want to go after and seek them out. And you'll find lots of folks just like JJ, especially in the music space, very willing. Leah and I went on a listening tour of 40 to 50 of the top leaders in music that were women, and we couldn't believe that the doors just flew open because everyone wanted this conversation to move forward. So I'd say email, and then plug into these networks and ask people to intro you to these folks, and at the end of each meeting, ask who are 3 people that you think I need to talk to and get in touch with to start building that network.
Definitely ask. You don't get anything without asking. So thank you. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say one more thing that oftentimes people don't think about. There are women philanthropists all around the United States that are also eager and willing to mentor young women that are going to leave their mark on society. Women Moving Millions is one of those organizations in New York. Reaching out to folks like that, part of those organizations, it's also critical, because you not only want people within business, but people within the giving community, right? Socializing you and introducing you to other women that can open doors in a very powerful way.
That's great. Thank you. So thank you both, and thank you all for sticking around.
Thank you.